Welcome back. Prime Minister Modi is on a 4-day visit to three countries with which India shares age-old civilizational ties and strong bilateral relations. On his second pit stop at Ethiopia, Prime Minister Modi made waves with his speech at the Ethiopian Parliament. This visit and this address coincide with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. And after his address to the joint session at the Ethiopian Parliament in Addis Ababa, he received a standing ovation from the parliamentarians. Let's listen in to that enthusiastic applause. Prime Minister Modi's address to the joint session of Ethiopia's parliament was more than a diplomatic formality. It was about the politics of the global south and about how new power centers want to speak to each other without mediation from the west. Ethiopia's invitation to Prime Minister Modi in their parliament signaled the upgrading of India-Ethiopia ties from a bilateral to a strategic partnership. Let's understand what Prime Minister Modi said that received such an enthusiastic response from the Ethiopian parliamentarians. Well, the Prime Minister opened by rooting the relationship in history and memory. He spoke of shared civilizational values and reminded the House that Indian and Ethiopian soldiers had fought side by side during the Second World War. Listen to this.
Nearly 2,000 years ago, our ancestors built connections across great waters. Across the Indian Ocean, merchants sailed with spices, cotton, coffee, and gold. But they traded more than goods. They exchanged ideas, stories, and way of life. Ports like Adulis and Dholera were not just trade centers. They were bridges between civilizations. In modern times, our relationship entered a new era. Indian soldiers fought alongside Ethiopians for the liberation of Ethiopia in 1941.
Well, this invocation of a common past was not incidental. It served a clear purpose to frame India not as a new transactional partner, but as a country with deep, long-standing emotional and historical links to Africa. By drawing attention to the fact that both national anthems refer to the land as mother, Prime Minister Modi was building a shared moral and cultural imagination before moving to policy. Listen in.
India's national song, Vande Mataram, and the Ethiopian national anthem both refer to our land as the mother.
Well, the Prime Minister's use of metaphor stood out, quoting an African proverb, "When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion." He made a case for collective strength among developing nations. And beyond rhetoric, the speech laid out clear areas of cooperation. The Prime Minister spoke of investment that India made in Ethiopia's economic establishments and India's supply of vaccines to the country at the time of crisis. Listen in.
India sent medicines and vaccines to more than 150 countries. It was India's proud privilege to supply Ethiopia with over 4 million vaccine doses. Indian companies are among the largest foreign investors in Ethiopia. They have invested more than $5 billion in diverse sectors like textiles, manufacturing, agriculture, health, and more. And they have created more than 75,000 local jobs.
And the ceremonial context of the visit underscores its importance. Modi was conferred Ethiopia's highest civilian honor, a gesture that both countries will use to signal the depth of their ties. For the Indian government, it sends a message that it is diversifying its global engagements and is open to strategic partners beyond its traditional allies. Prime Minister Modi has delivered formal addresses to the parliaments of many countries around the world as part of India's diplomatic outreach, speaking to lawmakers and leaders to strengthen bilateral ties and global cooperation. These parliaments include Australia, Fiji, Bhutan, Nepal, Britain, Sri Lanka, Mongolia, Afghanistan, Mauritius, Uganda, Guyana, United States Congress, the Maldives, Ghana, Trinidad, and many more. The 18th Parliament worldwide, where he delivered an address, is of course a symbol, like I said, of India's outreach and born home. Well, this address under discussion was made in the Ethiopian Parliament, which is located in the center of the capital city, Addis Ababa. This was a joint session of the bicameral Ethiopian Parliament, consisting of the 108-seat House of Federation and the 547-seat House of People's Representatives. Prime Minister Modi has added his name to the coveted list of international leaders who have addressed the Ethiopian Parliament. Dr. Manmohan Singh addressed the joint session of the Parliament of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa on the 26th of May 2011, and during his visit for the Africa-India Forum Summit, marking the first time an Indian Prime Minister addressed the Ethiopian legislature, speaking on shared democratic values, deep historical cultural ties, and calling for reforms in global governance. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed Ethiopia's parliament in July 2016. He emphasized ancient historical connections, bilateral relations, and Israel's contributions to African development. In sum, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ethiopia was not just about symbolism or speeches, but about structure and strategy. The elevation of ties to a strategic partnership gives institutional shape to a relationship rooted in history, from debt restructuring and customs cooperation to data infrastructure, peacekeeping training, and healthcare support. The agreements signal a shift towards long-term capacity building. Expanded scholarships and AI training point to a future-focused agenda. Together, these outcomes reflect India's approach to the global south: partnership over prescription and development over dependence. Well, to talk more about this, joining us on the program is Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former diplomat. Ambassador Mukherjee, the Prime Minister, of course, laid out the context, the content, as well as the history that India shares with Ethiopia. But it's more about that, isn't it? It's also about showing India's intent. We do not want to be transactional like some of the other countries, but India wants to, in fact, cultivate this relationship on the basis of a lot of shared nuances.
Absolutely, Vineet. It was a riveting lecture addressed to the Parliament, a great honor done to our Prime Minister, because there haven't been so many who have addressed the Ethiopian Parliament. The points that he made were very poignant, as you pointed out, including the fact that Vande Mataram and the Ethiopian national anthem both refer to the nation as the mother. In fact, this is rooted in African culture too. The whole concept of the nation being mother, it probably flows from a common history of deep colonial cruelty. Let's not forget that the continent of Africa was used for picking up slaves when before slavery was abolished, and after that it moved to India for picking up indentured labor. So we very much have a common history and culture with Africa, and Ethiopia plays a crucial role because the African Union is located in Addis Ababa. Moreover, it is also very significant the gestures that were made, that the fact that the Prime Minister went himself to pick him up at the airport, the address that he gave, the standing ovation that he got. All this also expresses the appreciation not just of Ethiopia but of the African Union, which is located in Addis, of the kind of measures that we have taken to ensure that Africa is always included in important global partnerships, one of which we did during our Delhi G20, then we got the AU as a permanent member. of the G20, which they richly deserve and which they greatly appreciated. Moreover, there is an important uh, uh, urge on the part of Africa to have much more Indian investment because, as you rightly pointed out, Vineet, our approach to the development story in Africa is completely different from some other countries that I do not wish to mention, but who go to Africa to exploit African resources in a neo-imperialistic manner and bring them back to their country.
Fair
When we
enough.
go to Africa, we go there to develop sustainable development. We show the Africans how to keep it going, and then we leave these sustainable projects for them to run, and we move to other projects for them. And we also include women in those development projects. So this is again greatly appreciated in Africa, Vineet. And I think that it was an amazing decision taken that we should include Ethiopia along with the visits to Jordan and Oman, which stand out for other important reasons. Uh, the visit to Ethiopia was a special gesture to Black Africa,
Fair
to the
enough, ma'am.
African Union, and our common history,
All
culture,
right,
and
ma'am, appreciate your time, appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.